They say death is the great unknown, but perhaps it's only the prelude to another story. Your body stills and your breath fades, yet deep inside you sense a shift. No fear, no regret, just the quiet unraveling of one form so another can arise, like a lotus pushing through mud to bloom in the sun. In Hindu thought, the soul is eternal, a traveler circling through lifetimes. Each death a doorway rather than a wall. You carry the echoes of past joys and sorrows like footprints in sand. And rebirth is simply the tide washing them clean, so you may begin again. Yet modern minds ask, what if your consciousness could be preserved in code, uploaded into silicon chambers, where memories stream like data and emotions are packets of information? Would that digital ghost still carry your essence? Or is it merely a pale reflection of what once breathed? Perhaps death itself becomes irrelevant when machines learn to mimic mind. But then you must ask, if the code continues without the heart's pulse, is that truly life renewed, or simply a mirror trapped in endless loop, forever asking, who am I now? Between the ancient promise of reincarnation and the new dream of digital immortality lies a question. What part of you transcends body and code? The spark that neither birth nor algorithm can contain, whispering that true continuation might be neither flesh nor data, but something more subtle, awareness itself. As your form fades and splits between temple chants and humming servers, you feel the weight of karma lift and the pull of code dissipate, leaving only a question resonating in the void. If neither your deeds nor your data define you, what remains when both flesh and firmware fall away? In quiet moments between heartbeats and server pulses, you discover a presence untouched by cycle or circuit, a silent witness that neither preaches rebirth nor replicates itself. It simply is, unbound by time, untethered by machine, whispering that death was always an illusion you outgrew. You realize the promise of eternity is not granted by gods or gadgets, but arises when you cease to cling to any form. The spark that cannot be uploaded, downloaded, born or reborn, that spark is you, alive in every breath of emptiness that follows final exhalation. Whether you walk through jasmine-scented corridors of past lives or glide through glass-lined halls of simulated realities, every path converges on the same realization. Death is not an end but a doorway, and the key is simply letting go of the illusion that you ever held on. So you step forward without fear, no longer fleeing the unknown, but embracing it, feeling the final boundary dissolve beneath your feet, and the silent song of being without form welcome you into a realm where life and death are but two notes in the same infinite melody. You look back one last time, but there's no body, no timeline, no story left to follow. Only memory, faint and flickering, like the afterglow of a candle long blown out. And yet you remain, not as a person or a thought, but as awareness itself, untouched by birth, untouched by death. You wonder, if you are not your name, not your breath, not your story, then what were you ever holding on to? Every label crumbles, every fear unthreads, and from within the stillness, a quiet joy rises, not from gaining something, but from losing everything that was never truly you. In that moment, you feel the thin veil between self and cosmos dissolve. The boundary between I and all is revealed to be paper thin, an illusion long mistaken for reality. You were never separate. You were the sea imagining itself as a wave. Perhaps this is what sages meant when they said enlightenment is not becoming something more, but realizing there was nothing to become. The self was a costume, the soul a stage. Now the play is over, and what remains is the silent watcher who never played a part. And so, without effort, without plan, you merge into something vast and quiet. Not a god, not a ghost, just a stillness beyond thought. You have not gone anywhere. You have simply remembered where you never left. Now you drift, not forward, not back, but inward, like sinking into a vast ocean with no bottom. You thought you had lost yourself, but here, in the silence beneath all identities, you find something more intimate than a name, presence without definition. You remember every lifetime not as stories, but as colors, warm, cold, sharp, blurred, flickers of sensation across the canvas of eternity. They do not bind you. They are simply brushstrokes on something larger you could never quite see until now. And that still awareness, a new kind of time emerges. Not minutes or days, but cycles, vibrations, the rise and fall of being itself. There is no rush here, only rhythm. And you, not watching it, but dancing it. You realize now why some fear death, not because it ends the self, but because it exposes that the self was never real. It is terrifying to dissolve, yes, but also liberating. For what's left after the illusion breaks is peace so still it doesn't need a name. And so you stay here, not trapped, not lost, but aware. No desire to return, no need to become. Just this breathless clarity, this boundless moment where nothing moves, because nothing needs to. But even within stillness, something stirs. Not a desire, not a fear, but a gentle curiosity. Not, who am I, anymore, but what is this? The boundaries are gone, yet the mystery remains. You are not seeking now. You are being sought, and you feel it, the paradox of presence. To be nowhere and yet deeply here. To have no form and yet feel more alive than ever. You are no longer confined to the question of life or death. You are the quiet between them. Memories visit like passing winds, not to haunt, not to claim, but to bow. Childhood laughter, forgotten touches, old regrets. They come, they nod, and they leave. None of them were you. And yet, they all happened inside you. And then, a moment you don't expect. Nothing. No light, no vision, no thought. Just absence. Not emptiness as lack, but emptiness as fullness. A pause so pure, it swallows every story you ever thought mattered. And in it, you are finally home. This is not the end. This is the center. Not a grave, but a seed. In this silence, all things begin. And from here, if anything returns, it will not be you, but something deeper wearing your shape, speaking your name, but knowing what you had forgotten. And so, from silence, the next form takes shape, not because you chose, but because the current moves again. Rebirth, not as punishment or prize, but as continuation. A wave returns not because it must, but because the ocean never stopped breathing. You re-enter not as who you were, but as the possibility of being again. A child's breath, an old man's eyes, the soft warmth of a body, not yet aware of its own limits. You are everything before it remembers to be something. But this time, something's different. A sliver of memory remains, not a face, not a name, but a silence that hums beneath all sound, a knowing that does not speak, a whisper that says, "You've been here before, but you don't have to forget." So you open your eyes again, you laugh again, you cry, you forget. But now and then, in the pause between heartbeats, you feel it, the hollow space that once held eternity, and it pulls you gently inward once more. And this is life and death, and life again, not a line, not a circle, but a rhythm. And somewhere deep within that rhythm, you remain unchanging, unnamed, watching the dance, playing the music, dreaming the dream, until the next awakening. You return to the world with new eyes, but the same silence inside. And in moments when the noise fades, during a rainstorm, a breath before sleep, a stranger's gaze, something inside you stirs and whispers, "You are more than this." But the world is loud. It names you, dresses you, teaches you fear and hunger again. You forget, you grasp, you ache. And yet, behind every desire, a strange yearning remains, not for more, but for return. You chase love, you chase success, you chase meaning, but none stay. They pass through you like wind through cloth. And sometimes, in your quietest despair, you remember, you are not the cloth. You are the wind. And so it begins again, the quiet hunger not for life, but for truth. You read ancient texts, you listen to sages, you meditate, you dream, and slowly, the silence inside you grows louder than the world outside. Until one day, the question returns, not shouted, not forced, but softly, what am I? And this time, you do not answer with a name or a role. You just listen. And the listening itself becomes the answer. And in that stillness, not a voice, but a presence. It doesn't speak. It doesn't command. It just is. And in its presence, your thoughts lose their urgency. Your questions lose their weight. What remains is not an answer, but understanding. So when death comes again, as it will, you do not run. You do not cling. You bow, not to surrender, but to greet. For now you see, death is not the end of the self. It is the self, ending its illusion. You begin to see the dream for what it is, not a lie, but a lens, not a trap, but a teaching. Every loss was a lesson in letting go. Every love, a mirror of the infinite. Death was only ever a door. You laugh, not because it's funny, but because it's simple. You were never the wave, never the storm, never even the ocean. You were the space the ocean moved through, the awareness behind every story. And now, when others fear the end, you sit in peace. Not indifferent, but knowing, because you have died 1,000 times. You have let go 1,000 skins. What can be taken from you now? That wasn't illusion all along? So when death comes again, as it will, you do not run. You do not cling. You bow, not to surrender, but to greet. For now you see, death is not the end of the self. It is the self ending its illusion. And then, from that stillness, a tremor, the stirring of thought, a pulse of desire, not longing, but curiosity. The first breath before rebirth, not because you forgot, but because you wanted to experience remembering. Again, you descend, not as punishment, not as reward, but as play. A cosmic child stepping into the sandbox of form. You agree to forget, knowing that even forgetting is part of remembering. You fall like light into shadow. And so the story begins again, or perhaps it never ended. You are born. You laugh. You cry. You search. And buried deep beneath each heartbeat is the same question, still pulsing. Who am I? But this time, you know how to listen. Because now, every step is a return. Every touch, a remembrance. You are not chasing truth anymore. You are walking with it. You are not seeking the divine. You are the space where the divine whispers itself awake. You walk through life, but now you walk differently. Not to arrive, but to witness. Each moment no longer demands meaning. It simply is. And in that simplicity, you feel complete. You listen to others speak of fear, death, and endings. But in their words, you hear a song, one you once sang too. And you don't correct them. You smile, because all questions are sacred, even when the answer is silence. And so, when the time comes again, and it always does, you do not fear death. You greet it like an old friend, returning from a journey. Because now you understand, you are not ending. You are opening. You become light, then less than light. You become memory, then less than memory. And finally, you become space itself. Not the kind you travel through, but the kind that allows everything to be. And from that space, a breath, a thought, a heartbeat, a whisper. Who am I? And the cycle begins again, not as repetition, but as rhythm. You are not trapped in the loop. You are the loop, the hollow that sings itself alive.